In the name of Allah, hello everybody. Welcome to our class today. I hope you are doing great as usual. Let's to start our lesson from Unit 2. In this unit, we will answer these questions. Define the computer motherboard. Describe the type of motherboard. What's computer card? What is computer basis? What's computer port? And the last question is how to install a video card in your computer. Okay. Computer motherboard. A computer motherboard is one of the most essential parts of a computer system. It holds together many of the crucial components of a computer, including the central processing unit or CPU, memory, and connectors for input and output devices. In addition to circuits, a motherboard contains a number of sockets and slots to connect the other components. Also, the motherboard serves as a single platform to connect all of the parts of a computer together. It connects the CPU, memory, hard drives, optical drives, video card, sound card, and other parts and expansion cards, direct or via cables. It can be considered as the backbone of a computer. The main printed circuit board in a computer is known as the motherboard. Other names for this central computer unit are system board, mainboard, or printed wired board, or PWB. The motherboard is sometimes shortened to MOBO. If you see anywhere MOBO, you must understand that means motherboard. Motherboard is shown in the figure as you are seeing now. Okay. The next one is feature of motherboard. Motherboard varies greatly in supporting various types of components. Motherboard supports a single type of CPU and few types of memories. Video cards, hard disk, sound cards have to be compatible with the motherboard to function properly. Motherboards, cases, and power supplies must be compatible to work properly together. Okay, let's go ahead. Description of motherboard. The motherboard is mounted inside the case and is securely attached via a small screw through pre-drilled holes. Motherboard contains ports to connect all of the internal components. It provides a single socket for CPU, whereas for memory, normally one or more slots are available for memory. Motherboard's private ports to attach the floppy drive, hard drive, and optical drives via ribbon cables. Motherboard carries fans and a special port designed for power supply. There's a peripheral card slot in front of the motherboard using which video card, sound card, and other expansion cards can be connected to the motherboard, as you are seeing in the figure. Okay. On the left side, motherboard carries a number of ports to connect the monitor, printer, mouse, keyboard, speaker, and network cables. Motherboard also provide USB ports, which allows compatible devices to be connected in plug-in, plug-out fashion. For example, pen drive, digital camera, and etc. As you are seeing in the figure, let's go ahead. History of the motherboard. The first motherboard, originally called a planar, was used in the IBM personal computer in 1981, I think. But the 80 or full 80 motherboard form factor was introduced by IBM in August month, I think 1984. Also, IBM introduced the BB80 motherboard form factor in 1985. The LPX motherboard form factor was developed by Western Digital in 1987, I think. Intel released the first version of the ATX specification for motherboard in July 1995. In the other years, also another motherboard introduced it, but you can read them in your book because we don't have enough time for explain all of them. Let's go ahead. Okay, students, here is the form factor. The design classification of the motherboard is called a form factor. The design classification are basically the sizes and shapes of the motherboard. There are a huge number of form factors available today, as we mentioned it in the history of the motherboard section, and only a motherboard having a specific form factor can be mounted on the respective systems, case or body. The common form factors used nowadays are following, like ATX or Advanced Technology Extended, and the next one is Micro ATX Motherboard, and the next ITX or Information Technology Extended. It's also important to say ITX is a collection of SFF or small form factor boards. BB80 motherboard was designed and made by the IBM company, and ATX is made by Intel company. Okay, students, the next one is type of motherboard. The component motherboard is named motherboard because it connects everything to each other. As we have discussed about that in the above page, although there are so many various of motherboards you can find on electronics store. The most common are four types that are shown in figure and you are seeing now. If you are going to build a PC or just want to know what type of motherboard are the most popular and what they do, then we will explain a type with an easy explanation. As we said, there are four types of motherboards which are generally used in PCs, which are as follows. As you are seeing in the figure, mini ATX motherboard, micro ATX motherboard, ATX motherboard, and EATX motherboard. Let's to explain one by one. Okay, the first one is mini ATX motherboard. What is this? From the name itself, you can guess the size. Generally, it's the smallest form factor which is used in PCs people use for day-to-day purpose. Mini ATX motherboard is shown in the figure as you are seeing. This is a very small motherboard which has limited feature but not necessarily the minimum. A mini ATX motherboard measures around 17 by 17 centimeter or 6.7 by 6.7 inch in dimension. Computer cases which support mini ATX motherboard will have the screw holes at the exact same position, no matter which case you buy, and these dimensions are fixed. Okay, here's a question. That why a mini ATX motherboard is used. Mini ATX motherboard is used to save as much as space possible, providing all the basic features a bigger board can provide. Some people prefer building a PC in a mini ATX case, which is also much smaller than an ATX case and provides a compact solution to those who don't have enough space for their PCs. Okay, students, let's go ahead. The next one is Micro ATX Motherboard. A Micro ATX motherboard is bigger than the ATX motherboard and smaller than an ATX motherboard. Generally, it has dimensions as 24.4 by 24.4 centimeter or 9.6 by 9.6 inch, but some motherboards may have dimensions as 9.6 by 8.1 inch or 24.4 by 20.6 centimeter depending upon the slots and ports they come with. A modern high-end Micro ATX motherboard is shown in the figure as you are seeing now. Okay, students, remember this. But here is also a question that why a Micro ATX motherboard is used. A Micro ATX motherboard serves both the purpose of good feature and compactness. As it is bigger than an ATX motherboard, it is support more slots and ports while remaining smaller than a full ATX motherboard. The size also varies, making it a flexible form factor. Okay, let's go ahead, students. Okay, the third one is ATX motherboard. What is your idea about the ATX motherboard? Send your idea in the group chat, okay? The standard ATX form factor is the most popular because it has every feature which can fulfill almost every requirement, be it for gaming or productivity. An ATX motherboard is longer than a Micro ATX and smaller than an ATX, I think, motherboard. A modern ATX motherboard is shown in the figure and you are seeing that, I'm sure. An ATX motherboard packs in tons of feature with a lot of upgradability that is enough for several years depending on the user's needs. More ports and slots are available as compared to many ATX and Micro ATX, but it costs more than the two form factors mentioned above. Generally, dimensions of an ATX motherboard are 12 by 9.6 inches or 30.5 by 24.4 centimeter. Almost every might tower can fit in an ATX motherboard without any problem. Okay, students. Also, here's a question that why an ATX motherboard is used. An ATX motherboard provides almost every feature which an enthusiast may need, including overclocking, a lot of storage support, high-end CPUs, more memory, better cooling, and etc. An ATX form factor motherboard is good for those who don't have any space problem and have a good size CPU cabinet that takes more space than a Micro ATX or mini ATX cases. Also, ATX motherboard looks better in design and fill up the introduce of a. Okay, students, let's go ahead because we don't have enough time. The fourth one is ATX motherboard. An ATX motherboard is something not usual and common among most people. Many enthusiasts prefer to stay with an ATX motherboard, but those who need some serious horsepower and are in the industry where more CPU cores and huge memory size are needed. ATX motherboard come as the best solution. ATX motherboard is shown in the figure, as I'm sure you are seeing that. An ATX motherboard measure as 12 by 10.9 inches or 30.5 by 27.7 centimeter in dimension, which is the biggest among the four types I mentioned, having more weight, which is due to increased them slow. The capability of an ATX motherboard is insane, and they do not come into budget category anyways. Their sockets and processor are different and are much more powerful. Okay, students, here's also a question that why an EATX motherboard is used. An EATX motherboard has every feature that is needed to do high-end stuff like rendering, video processing, and tank, which a normal ATX board can't do. The limit is not defined, and so the cost. A person building a PC with an EATX motherboard will have to buy a very high-end processor that will have a lot of cores and threads, which are not available in mainstream processor. These motherboards acquire a lot of space and require at least full tower cases, which are really huge. Okay, students, it was our lesson today. Please pay attention to your homework. The first question of your homework is, what is the main job of motherboard? The next question of your homework is, what type of motherboard is in your computer? Please research about yourself computer. Okay. And also the third question of your homework is, does your phone have motherboard? Okay, students, please serve your homework, do your homework, and send in the group or my special address in the WhatsApp. And in the next lesson, we will have a discuss about the component of motherboard. Okay, students, have a good time. Good luck.